Welcome to Utah Stories. So we have a big announcement to make, and this is a long time coming. We've been alluding to it, talking about it a little bit. But today on the program with me, I have with me Michael Jewkes, the director of our first episode of our first documentary film that Utah Stories has produced. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be here.
So it's kind of an interesting serendipity how we kind of met, bumped into each other. We were kind of doing the same thing. I knew I wanted to do a big long-term project on homelessness and make a documentary. You were doing the same thing. How did you get into doing your film?
Great question. It's pretty kind of random how it all happened. My background is in film. I worked as an assistant director on a number of film sets back in 2021, 22. And I realized that my thing was much more journalistic. What I wanted to pursue, I wanted to work more in documentary film. And so I sort of just did what everyone in my family does when they feel like they want to try something, and I just kind of went for it without really knowing what I was doing. So beginning of the year, I started reading up about the homeless issue in Salt Lake City, and I realized how awful the experience was of the Unsheltered folks, and kind of where there was kind of a disconnect between them and the people offering the services, especially in leadership and government. And so I just kind of went for it. And then somewhere along the road, making this documentary, I followed kind of the protagonist of our film to this same podcast, and that's where I met you, and we teamed up, and here we are.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, so if you don't know already, you probably do know because people are nicknaming us Utah Homeless Stories. We've been covering this now for a couple of years, and the way I got into it was I just started Utah Stories 12 years ago, was down in the middle of Pioneer Park, and I thought, why not ask the question, why has this been a drug park for as long as I've been alive? Why are there always drugs and homeless people in this park? That was like 16 years ago. And then flash forward to 2 years ago, and I see that even after the time we declared a victory over homelessness in 2015, 2016 it got worse, 2017 even worse, 2018 worse. It's just like getting worse and worse and worse. So my big question is, why is it as the government spends more and more money on the problem of homelessness, is it only getting worse? And I feel like we kind of get to that a little bit in the first episode, but this is going to be 5 episodes, and I think that's the big question. And in your estimation, how would you summarize the answer to that question?
That's you're absolutely right. We kind of cover our bases in this first episode. There's so much more to this issue, and that's why it's not just one film long. We need 5 episodes that are going to be like 45 minutes each. And this question of kind of what happened, why did we just kind of fall off, being sort of what the rest of the country kind of considered was the top of the homeless services.
The best example in the country for a while.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everyone was out on the street. When you talk with advocates, you talk with government leaders, there's always a city through the grapevine that everyone's talking about. Lately it's been Denver, but back in 2015 it was Salt Lake City. Everyone was talking about how we had sort of created a really good system, and people were getting off the street. They were getting services, right? And I would say we got a little confident with that, and what we forgot was homelessness. The unsheltered population, the analogy that I think a lot of us use is it's just sort of like a problem that needs solving, right? It's an item on a checklist, right? Here's homelessness. We solved it in 2015. Now we don't have to think about it anymore, right? Mm-hmm. But then what happens if you, I would compare it more to a muscle, right? Just like myself, I haven't been to the gym in months. You can't just call it, I worked out once and it's solved, right? Now I'm in shape all of a sudden, right? It's a continuous thing because these are people, right? It's not an object that you just have to do. It's much more complex than that. And right when we stopped thinking about them as people, we dropped off.
Mm-hmm. And I think the way the government tends to think about it compared to how like perhaps the religious or spiritual community thinks about it. The government sees it as a material problem. Oh, you got a homeless person, give them a home. And that's been the transition we've seen in this country since we've moved from temporary shelters as being the primary way we shelter the unhoused to permanent supportive housing, which is let's just put up chronic homeless people in permanent housing and let them work on their problems in an indoor setting. And we thought, I think the government leaders thought that's the solution. Just put them up in houses. But it misses that spiritual component. Like a person isn't homeless just because they are lacking a home. Usually there's a lot bigger issues at play. And I think just providing the material need doesn't address those bigger issues.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's the way that the two communities look at it, and there's a big disconnect because of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have your, we'll call them, more spiritually human-centered, focused advocates, right? And that's the protagonist of our film. We follow Ty Bellamy. You've interviewed her plenty of times. We've been following her around on the street quite a bit. Ty Bellamy definitely sees the human element of this. Mm-hmm. She understands the financial element, right? But then you go on the other side, and government leaders who spend very little time with the homeless, like people like Ty do, and it's almost purely a financial problem, right? And so bridging this gap is kind of what we're hoping to do, because you need the money, you need to be able to fund this. You need the material help, but if you don't look at them as people, and you look at them as a kind of just a material thing, like we're talking about, just something that you have to check off your list, then neither one's going to work. These people need their help, and they need these people's help.
Yeah, and I think what we've discovered is every year our state legislature allocates more to affordable housing, more to shelters, more to homeless resources, but we're not getting anywhere near the level of wraparound services that the homeless population needs. And also there's not nearly enough shelter space, and the homeless population is growing. That's a lot of complicated issues as to why those things are happening. And we drill down in this film why these things are happening by talking to experts in these different categories, whether it's Dave Droscher or Joseph Grenny, who's from the Other Side Academy, or we talked to Carol Hollowell of Switchpoint, and all these organizations, these leaders, and asked them, why is there this deficiency? Why does this keep happening? And then Ty Bellamy as well, who's boots on the ground, helping the homeless. What can be done to alleviate this problem and solve it? It's obviously a national crisis right now. And I think you'll be surprised by what you find. It's been a really fun project to work on. We're both addicted to covering homeless services and what this problem actually entails, because it's a massive problem that our whole nation is facing, and I believe there are solutions out there. Like, I thought when we'd get into this, like, we would discover maybe the ideas and the solutions that would work the best, but I think the solutions are there. It's just a matter of financing the right solutions that actually work.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to believe that we could allocate $55 million to homelessness and say that that's not like enough. That's so much money, but it's not working. So the problem is not how much we've got and the resources. We have the people, and then the money exists too, right? But bridging the gap is going to be the key to actually learning how to solve this, because it might seem like it's unsolvable, but I think you and I both know, being on the street for a couple of years, that it's solvable.
Yeah, and it all comes back to personal accountability and institutional accountability. That's not happening. That's what's created these massive deficits in the systems, and I really am grateful for folks like Dave Droscher, who was on this program last week talking about that, what a massive difference just personal accountability makes when you have that, when you make sure a person is being held accountable for their actions. You give them the opportunity. They either accept that opportunity or they don't, and if they don't, I mean, we can't have a sustainable situation or a city where we allow hundreds of people to be wandering around using drugs, defecating on the street. We can solve this, and I think Utah Stories wants to be a big part of this solution. So if you want to get your ticket to the film, they are selling really quickly now. It's like they started out kind of slow. Go out to utahstories.com, you'll see a pop-up window for the tickets. You can either get a regular ticket or a VIP ticket, which the VIP ticket, because it's at Brewvies Cinema Pub, gives you both entry into our film and the panel discussion, and you'll also get a drink, either a beer or a cocktail, if you get the VIP ticket. So act fast while supplies last, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.